Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for attending this week's Enwayaang talk. We would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. So, sustainability leadership in the right place at the right time. Youth Leadership and Sustainability, YLS, is an innovative experiential learning program based in Peterborough, Ontario, that provides experiences and opportunities for grade 11 and 12 students to develop the skills to play a leadership role in protecting our planet. YLS is a Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board program in partnership with Trent University and the Kawartha World Issue Center. It's my pleasure to introduce you to YLS founder and lead teacher, Cam Douglas. Welcome and thank you for joining us today, Cam. Oh, I think you're muted, Cam.
Well, you'd think like maybe 12 months into Zoom calling, I'd have that part figured out by now, wouldn't you? Thank you for both for the warm welcome and pleasure. This is my first time in this series. I appreciate that quick who's in the room. It's nice to know who we're talking to, and to be perfectly honest, these days when we're so sort of separated from each other, it's nice to sort of have that connection and not be talking into a blank Zoom screen. So thank you all for that. And I'll just introduce myself a little bit. I am of settler ancestry. I grew up in Etobicoke and schooled at University of Waterloo. I have actually a background in engineering, but moved on to a Master's of Environmental Studies, and that's, I think, where some of my passion took shape. I've lived on the West Coast for a while, got started in some teaching out there, and came back to Ontario to raise a family, settled here in Peterborough, and got hired on by the Kawartha Pine Ridge Board back in 2002. So my wife Yvonne's also in the board. She's a grade 8 teacher here, had just started this year at Adam Scott, and as Melanie mentioned, I've got a couple of kids who I envy every day. They're both working and skiing out on mountains in British Columbia in a gap year. So to get things started today, what I had in mind, I wanted just to sort of set out a bit of a context for this conversation. And I'm going to ask you a question. I'd like to get some responses to a question because it's a question that I have spinning through my head all the time, and I have had spinning through my head for about the last, probably since I started teaching, but especially the last 10 or 15 years. And ultimately, it's an answer to that question that gave rise to this program that I'd like to share with you today. So to get things started then, I don't have any PowerPoint slides, but I do have some images I wanted to share with you. And I'm going to ask you, as much as you can, to imagine you are a high school student. And as many high school students do, paying attention to the news that's coming through on your social media. And to set the stage, I'm going to share a few images that I think might resonate, what I know resonate with young people, and I think will resonate with you as well. And hopefully this will work. Maybe give me a thumbs up if you, I've got you on my screen there, Meredith. Thumbs up if you can see my screen. Great. So, stuff's coming at us, and you don't have to look very far to see, the ravaging impacts of climate change. Oh, sorry, that's not advancing. Let me just. There we go. Or hearing about deforestation playing out around the planet. You see stories about the dying coral reefs and understand some of the implications of that for our food sustainability, and increasingly aware of the fact that our oceans are filling up with plastic. And over a period of time, in a sense, I think all of us, and especially young people, you end up with this collage of destruction, planetary destruction, taking root in your head and your psyche, and that's difficult. It's difficult for all of us, but I think especially for young people. And perhaps no image captures this, that maybe that thought and that indignant sense of what the hell are you doing with my planet, adults, than you know, this picture of Greta from last year, just the outrage. This was her "How dare you" speech that, you know, we heard before, and you're probably familiar with. That to me is a starting point for this conversation. The next thing I want to share with you, I discovered literally about half an hour ago. I was just looking at the news and came across, it's the wee story that broke today. It's on Fifth Estate, and it's you know, tracing the story of the rather tragic story of the wee charity and ultimately the Trudeau family connection. And there was some footage of Justin Trudeau, and if I do the math right, this was actually just before he got elected, you know, as just a member of Parliament. And I would love to share just, it's about just less than 2 minutes of the video. And to me, it absolutely captures the sort of the starting point for today's conversation. And, you know, we'll have to see how, let me just get to the right spot here. We'll have to see how well we do with the video here. So at least I think the sound should work. It's called, you know, Rare Video. Meredith, do we have the screen up there? Okay, so I'll make it full screen here. Just give it a second. It's kind of interesting seeing the younger, slightly less polished, but perhaps more unscripted Justin Trudeau.
All right. Salut mes amis, je suis tellement content d'être ici, là, je peux vous le dire. Let me tell you that this room right here makes a very powerful statement. Because you know, let's be honest for a second here. Young people get a bad rap. We get told all the time that we're, you know, apathetic sometimes and cynical sometimes and disconnected sometimes. And you know what? Sometimes we are, but it's not because we don't care about the world. Never because we don't care about the world, but because we care so much about the world that we're so frustrated that we don't have a voice, that we don't have power, that we can't make a difference. You know, it's so important to get out there, and I see young people getting involved in all sorts of different causes, from Free to Children, to Greenpeace, to Amnesty International, to local community causes, to all sorts of range of ways that you can get involved. But as my good dear friend, John Turner, former Prime Minister, just said, young people don't tend to get involved enough in politics. And for me, it's easy to say, oh, it's young people's fault not to get involved in politics. But more, I think it might be politics' fault that it's not doing enough to bring in young people. Because we need you. We need your vision. We need your dreams. We need your ability to think long term. You're looking at what this world's going to look like in 50 years, in 100 years. You're not worried only about right now. And that vision, that long-term thinking, that sense of responsibility, and mostly, let me hear it, that energy is exactly what we need.
So I love it. I mean, politics aside, I mean, what Trudeau's tapping into there for me is the starting point for this conversation and for the YLS program. And I would like to, just before I get going here, I'd love to turn this around to you folks and ask you, given, you know, this need that he's talking about, you know, we need to hear your voice, and this recognition that we all know we tend not to hear young people's voices in our world. A number of you are involved in various education from different angles. What does that look like? I mean, as a starting point, what would you think would be the key components of getting those voices, those important voices, meaningful and influencing some of these important decisions? I mean, climate, obviously, Greta Thunberg has put that image as a youth image, you know, on the map, but there are others. And I'm just wondering if you have any just starting thought, like right now, with looking at that audience that Trudeau was looking at, and taking that raw energy and somehow translating that into a voice in our political process? What would be the key pieces to that? What do these kids need? And thanks, yeah, let's use the chat there. Thanks, Mel. But jump in if if anybody has a thought to share, verbally as well.
I think inspiring teachers such as you, Cameron Douglas.
Hey, Will, good to see you.
For everybody who doesn't know, I'm a past student of Cam's, and I went to YLS, and I learned so much there, environmentally, and just being a leader, like empowering youth to speak their voice and not like be prepared to face the repercussions of saying something wrong, but also having that safety of correcting yourself and doing better all the time, you know?
Right, so
Nice to see you, Cam.
You too, Will. That was a nice surprise. It's great to see your mom there. Yeah, so Will was actually in the inaugural class in 2018, so a true guinea pig in the program, when none of us knew what YLS was. We're just finding it from day to day. So Will, I think you're speaking to the need for perhaps practicing some of the advocacy skills in a safe environment before venturing out onto a larger stage. Thank you. What else? How do we take that raw energy from those students, Mel?
Well, I was just thinking, and I was thinking about the Greta piece when I typed in the chat, but I think what we hear a lot from students in their first and second year at Trent, for sure, and I'm sure you hear it at the high school level, is I don't it's overwhelming, and I don't know that the things I'm going to do are going to matter. Like, there's a bit of a cynicism in young people that shows their maturity. I think that they recognize a lot of planetary doom, and they feel helpless against the tide of that. So I don't know, but I think that those small acts add up. And even though that can sound a little trite, I think it matters. I think that, practicing what you preach, and Will kind of said it, but not just sort of saying, what are you going to do? Allowing students to realize that anything that they are doing that's moving in the right direction can have a ripple effect, and they don't have to be Greta. They don't have to sail across the ocean and stand up in front of the UN or something to make a difference. And I think sometimes the Greta piece can be intimidating to a degree.
Right. So, and you captured that idea in the chat there about sort of starting small, and there's I want to talk about a few students in that regard, who started small and YLS and have literally now sort of exploded into on a larger stage from here in Peterborough. So I think you're absolutely right there. Start small and build on successes. What are the other pieces to this? How do we?
I'm going to just jump in on. It kind of links into what you've just been saying, Melanie, and also Julie and I were just literally talking about localization. And one of the things is, I think when we talk about global warming and climate change, and it's very international, it's very up there, and people can't always see on their daily lives what change they can make, and which affects these global issues. And it's this thing of if you bring it down to the local and say to people, what can you do in your own home? What can you do in your own life? And what influence can you have on the people around you? Then, and this was a phrase that I quite liked from my studies, where someone said that you can be the agent of change yourself. And that's very empowering. And I think people just need to realize that, yeah, you can't do anything about government policy, and every single person can't change policy on the individual level, but you can make a big change yourself, and that has a big impact, because our carbon footprints are huge. So if you lower yours, then you've made a huge impact on your carbon footprint, and that's something to be applauded, and that influences people around you, and as you say, the ripple effect comes out from that. And I think really we just need to tell people, don't worry about it on a global level. That's just too overwhelming and too much for you. And that's for everybody. That's not just for young people. Just think about what you can do in your life, and then actually you find that you have the capacity to do so much more than you think you can.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, one of those things that Trudeau speaks to is let's bring in the political side of this now. he's, as John Turner was saying, we tend not to hear about, we don't hear from young people in our political discourse. And Trudeau was saying, well, I think we need to find out a way from hearing from them. So how do we hear from young people? How do we amplify their voices? Julie.
Yeah, I was imagining looking at that crowd if every one of those young people could vote. And I think there's still an opportunity that's being missed by not lowering the voting age because young people, if they have an opportunity, even at 16 and up, then they are also more likely,
right.
Maybe a bit more optimistic than at 19 when they're getting their voting card, or, or 18. Anyways, Kieran's card just came in the mail, but he has to, he now has an opportunity to vote. But I feel like if it had come a few years earlier, there might have even been more excitement and engagement around that opportunity.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The research is so clear too about you get started young and you'll be an active voter and citizen. Well, hopefully citizen as well. But those habits gel at such an early age, for better or for worse. Yeah, Roxanne.
I think as an Indigenous woman, we have to look at worldview. So our traditional ways that our children and youth and our elderly are revered and listened to, and our youth, even right now, I count on our youth to bring forward our future for the next 7 generations. I'm still a strong advocate for many things environmentally and otherwise, but my time really is over. It's up to them to pick up that bundle, and they will make the decision whether it will be worth it or not because of the way things are going. We really are at a crossroad on many levels, in many areas, on many ways. But I really believe worldview. I just saw a video Thomas King had put out. I don't know how old it was. And what keeps in my mind was thinking about, the settler, I'm going to say invasion, but, he said, what would have happened if we led and they followed? I don't think we'd be where we are right now. Our views, our worldview, our connection to land, to earth, to the cosmos, everything is alive, and I think it would be very different. So with all that said, we need a culture that comes forward to revere our youth, to revere those ones that are coming.
Right, and thank you for that. And I'll speak a little bit later to what we try and do to honor exactly that as settler educators, to try and tap into that profound relationship, we call sustainability, you call a relationship with the land and all things. And how do we try and bring that to life in the program to kind of exactly to change the worldview? So some of the readings we do really are focused on that. And I think this was from Lisa, reconnecting people with place and then education plus nature contact. So that I think you'll see in the images that we do try and do that. Maybe I'll jump right in now and just, I want to start maybe with the introduction to the program is to say that I've had this unease in my stomach for a number of years teaching geography primarily and world issues and civics. That I just couldn't go far enough in a regular classroom setting. And, I have my 75 minutes with the students and, the first 10 minutes they're, coming in and unpacking from whatever the class they just came from. And then 5 minutes before they leave, they're on, thinking about their math test coming up and ultimately limited by the field work I can do. And Lisa, you spoke about the importance of getting into nature and getting outside, and you're left with about 60 minutes to go outside. And some parts of the city, that's not a bad idea. But I was teaching down at Kenner, and there wasn't a whole lot of green space to tap into in the south end of the city. So feeling really frustrated. I could get maybe 1 or 2 full day field trips in, and then all the other teachers start getting anxious that I'm taking their kids out of their math class and their English class. So I got thinking there's got to be some better way to do this. And I got thinking more and more and started talking with Julie. and a number of others in the community. And this really, to be honest, is when you look at this YLS model, there's so many voices that have shaped the way my YLS is actually running. A number of you will know Stephen Hill in the School of Environment. He had a very significant impact on shaping some of the course offerings and how it plays out. So I'm going to share my screen again. Whoops, just a minute. Oh, there we go. And just as a starting point, so we all have the right reference point here. It is actually YLS, Youth Leadership and Sustainability, is a program run by the Kawartha Pine Ridge Board. And it's for grade 11 and 12 students. We draw from around the region. So the obvious schools, you know, in town, Crestwood, Adam Scott, Kenner, and Tass, PCVS. We've drawn from down to Clark and out to Norwood. This year we've got students coming in, but we also have students coming in from the two Catholic high schools as well. So we've had students from St. Pete's and student from Holy Cross that you'll meet later, and many of you would know Jeff Bowman, and I'm talking about his son. So it's a regional program, and it's partnered. I'm going to start with the partnership with actually the Kawartha World Issues Center, because it really was through conversations with Julie that took root. And Kawartha World Issues Center, with such deep connections in thinking about how young people find their voice and engage in the larger world issues, but also with its expertise in connecting into granting. YLS was actually got started with a Ontario Trillium Seed Grant, and it was really Julie's expertise that got us that. And I'm pretty sure, Julie, that if you hadn't put your pen to that, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. So Quick has been partnered throughout, and those connections are treasured. Every year we connect in with different Quick activities and work with some of their youth engagement folks, which is delightful. The other main partner, of course, is Trent University. That's why we're in this conversation today. And you'll see, I'll leave it there for now. You'll see what that partnership looks like as I move through. One of the neat things about the program is that through Stephen Hill's engagement, in addition to the 4 high school credits that the students get. So it's a regular high school program. They're with us for 5 months. Just anybody who knows a high school student knows you take 4 credits every 5 months. So it's a full-time semester. So you earn your 4 credits, but through this partnership agreement, students also, if they get an 80% average in the 2 environment-focused courses, they actually have, through a cross-articulation agreement, they have a first-year university credit. So when I'm sort of pitching this, I say to grade 10 students who are thinking about it for the next year, I said, you could be halfway through grade 11 and have your first university credit in your back pocket. So it's a nice little draw. And it, of course, some people say, well, what's in it for Trent? I think they recognize that given the very strong focus in the school environment and the School for Indigenous Studies, that the students who are attracted to this program may well make good Trent students. So the classroom is actually at Trent University. So you may, without those of you who are on campus, may have walked by some high school students, and of course in grade 11 and 12 they look a lot like your first year students. But we are actually on campus, and in the top right corner, our classroom for the first 2 years was actually in Autonomy College, just out the back. So looking at our back window, we saw the teepee, and we had access to the teepee, which was a wonderful way of kind of rethinking about power relationships in a classroom. And of course the green space, and then you know, COVID strikes, and that classroom wasn't going to work. We were crammed in like sardines. So through your Dean of Science, Dean Hintelman, and the principal at Lady Eaton College. And it's been a long day. Kat Freeman helped me out, Mel.
Christine Freeman Roth.
And I literally just sent her an email like 20 minutes before the call. Christine Freeman Roth, through generosity, gave us the Lady Eaton College lecture hall for our class this year. So there we are on the left side, out in the quadrangle. And we make our way around campus, and it is such a beautiful place to be for so many reasons. There we are up at the vegetable garden. but accessing some of the special events, and also hosting university professors. I'll speak to that a bit more, into the classroom to talk about what they're passionate about and try and spark different interests from different students. So that's kind of the first Trent connection. But we also, we typically spend Monday to Thursday at Trent.
Cam, can I just interrupt you to do a share screen again with us?
Oh, thank you for letting me know.
We lost the last few images.
Oh, okay. Does that work better now, Mel? Okay, sorry about that, folks.
Yeah, we're there now. Just go. Yeah, that's awesome. So you can see the nice pictures of everyone outside. Thanks.
Yeah. I love teaching at Trent. It is just such a dynamic place to be at so many levels. The faculty, the staff, the facilities, the special events, and the students respond in beautiful ways. I wasn't sure what to make of it before we got started, but it has been an absolute key cornerstone piece of this program. And sometimes hard to put their finger on what exactly it is. But one of the things that I hadn't really thought about too much beforehand, but for many of these young people, many or most of them are, they're either college or university bound. And there's a huge amount of anxiety for most of our young people as they venture out of their cozy little high schools into the big world of university. So this is kind of a very low-key way of working through some of that anxiety. So you have this kind of university light experience where you get the hang of it. And we actually sit in on the first year environmental science lecture. I should have mentioned that earlier. It's one of the things we do to honor that cross-articulation agreement. So they actually sit in on a larger lecture. They hear university professors. They get a sense of what that looks like, what the assignments look like. We do some of the assignments in the first year class. So then when they venture off to wherever, hopefully a bunch of them to Trent, they have that like, oh yeah, I can do this. And I think in light of our mental health focus these days, that's probably a pretty good thing to think about. The program is actually administered out of the Alt Ed school at PCVS, where I did actually most of my high school teaching before it closed in its traditional role. And this gives us access to the downtown. So we work closely with some of the agencies, the City of Peterborough, Green Up, and others. And this gives us a base. So typically Monday to Thursday up at Trent, Fridays at PCVS. And what that also does is allow, it's just a detail, but it actually allows all our students to stay involved with sports at their home school. It's just a detail I can share if you're curious later, but that's actually pretty important for many of our students, you can imagine, so they don't have to choose between sports or YLS. So I think I'm going to jump right in here, and I'm just going to give you a visual tour of how YLS has tried to answer the question that I posed to you a moment ago, and the sort of the issue addressed by Trudeau in that talk. And to Lisa, to your point, I think we can all appreciate it's hard to love something, and it's hard to advocate to protect something if you don't love it. So we try and get outside as much as we possibly can. That image there is the Trent Wildlife Sanctuary on I think our second day. You're looking good there, Will. So that's a starting point. And I think last year, if I wasn't doing the counting, but somebody else did, I think we're out on 26 field trips. So a key component to this is to being outside, not only to sort of appreciate nature, but also we've come more this year more than any other year to value the mental health benefits of moving the classroom outside into that less structured environment. Just as important is the connection with community partnerships. And when we look at this challenge of young people trying to engage and find their voice, we don't have to look too far. And the idea here is that let's look to the best practices in our own community. Let's see what they're doing. Let's see how they're engaging with this. Let's see what we can learn from these people. Let's get to know these people so that maybe in summer job time, or we're looking for a co-op placement, or maybe even work afterwards, we have some faces, we have some names, and we know how to get started in our community. So the community partnerships are an absolute cornerstone of YLS. And that's what this next little section is going to step us through. So we work carefully with Jacob and others at Camp Kawartha, their Environment Center, and on other issues. And you know, there's very few people in our community who speak more poignantly to the value of connecting young people with the natural world than Jacob and the team up at the Environment Center. Also at the Environment Center this year, and also with Rosemary Ganley, which was a great treat. She joined us this day, working with Strawworks in building their new health center. And the idea here, again, working community partners for young people to see that there are some fantastic options for reducing our footprint when we build. You know, straw bale homes are still relatively novel. I hope that's not the case 10 years from now in YLS. But nonetheless, we got to roll up our sleeves and work with Deirdre here and her two assistants for a day, and the kids loved that. There's a kind of a funny looking guy at the back of the screen that you might recognize on the call today. This is how I met Dennis. This was the 2019 class, and Dennis came in and shared. You can see that's our classroom, the autonomy classroom. You can sort of see why it didn't function terribly well for a YLS. Sorry, for a COVID setting. But anyway, Dennis came in and shared with the students the work he does with prey and predator relationships in up in the Yukon, and that sort of functions at different level. I mean, they're engaging with the professors, seeing how professors communicate differently, say, than a high school teacher. But for different kids in the classroom, a spark's going to go off. Some kid might have said, yeah, whatever, lynx and hare. Another kid's going to say, you know what, I want to be a wildlife researcher like this guy. So so Dennis came in, and that's how Dennis got to know the program. And we were so fortunate to have Dennis and Cynthia's son, Dylan, this year. You might recognize Eric Sager coming in talking about ecological restoration on another day. And the more we can, you know, expose young people to these people who have worked passionately on these issues, the better, in my view. And sometimes if you feel like we're going in different directions, it's you know, trying to tie it together with structure is sometimes difficult, but I try not to worry too much about that. Out in the community, looking at the opportunity for renewable energy in our community. So out at the Lily Lake Solar Farm and down at London Street generating station. So working with the PUC. The dial up there is telling you, on the left is telling you how much of your energy is coming from renewables at any given moment. First year, we were up with James Wheatung at Curve Lake, working with wild rice. A wonderful day. This is from last year. Working with Jeff Beaver at Alderville in his outdoor classroom, and his daughter processing wild rice, understanding its significance from an ecological and cultural perspective, and actually doing some of the processing, dancing the rice, which was wonderful. And then we spent the afternoon at the Black Oak Savannah trying to understand this really quite remarkable ecological restoration site, and understanding how and why it happens as it does. Closer to home here, up at the top right, that's Jeff Bowman's son, Jacob, who was a student, but for this day, he was our field trip leader. He's a Holy Cross student who probably knows Harper Park as well as anybody in the city. So he stepped us through to help us understand, you know, the biodiversity resources, but also the threats to that part of our city and the southern end. It's really a poorly understood, but significant part of our biodiversity here. And if you look at the bottom left corner, I love this picture because who'd have known that that's actually a brook trout stream. So the rare urban brook trout are actually living, and we're looking at the brook trout in that creek. And you could see why it would be important to know that, because ditches could easily be, you know, moved and destroyed. Last year, we had a project working with the downtown, with the city of Peterborough on their plastics abatement program, and working directly with local businesses to try and move the dial on single-use plastics. And so this was a chance for students to engage directly with business owners, develop some skills in communication and confidence that way, and ultimately pulled together kind of a protocol that we were encouraging local businesses to follow. And the idea was to follow up this year, but with COVID, we weren't able to engage directly. Also developing confidence, again, to your point, Will, earlier about developing the skills, but the confidence to actually step up. Here we are working with the city of Peterborough, doing survey work with folks downtown to better understand their reaction to some of the changes in the sidewalks and cycling infrastructure. You can tell that this year, the face masks are our signature of YLS 2020. Working really closely this year with the Autonomy Conservation and doing some tree planting around the stormwater ponds. That's just behind Walmart, and another one in East City, and then ultimately replanting a gravel pit up in Selwyn. So there's not many more nurturing experiences you can do in life than planting a tree and learning about what its benefits are. And then we're working with this organization. They're a fantastically well organized and well positioned organization for young people to work with. A couple of years earlier, they were leading us through some stream quality assessment through macroinvertebrate analysis. I was really pleased this year. We got out on bikes for the first time, and trying to reacquaint some young people with their bikes if they hadn't been on them for a while, but more importantly, to help them understand the role that bicycles might play as we try and green our transportation systems. We just so happen to be in the middle of a cycling master plan rethinking and a transportation master plan review. So this is a perfect time to be thinking about this. And we rode the Parkway corridor for them to better appreciate what's actually there, and they'd have a more hands-on sense of what's at stake should we choose to build that parkway through in the end. We rode the different kinds of infrastructure and met with the city's cycling coordinator, Sue Sauvé, to understand what the issues are. I think you'll recognize that, not too far from those of you who are positioned up at Trent. So working really closely with Emma McDonald. And this year in the garden, but in previous years up at the rooftop garden. And these YLS faces are regular in the Season Spoon Cafe. So making that connection between food production and sustainable food consumption. Last year, we were on an overnight trip up to Halliburton Forest, and I'm just blanking on his name there, the professional forester there. We're in one of the research foresters and trying to understand what they're doing to better understand what sustainable harvest looks like. It's an easy word to say, a little more difficult to actually get it right. So we spent 3 days up there, one of which we spent where students become leaders. So here's Nico, he's from St. Pete's. All of a sudden thrown to the wolves, he's now the leader of this particular water festival site, and he's got, energetic young kids coming at him all day, and it's holy cow, does that ever call on you to step up your game? I think you'll recognize the street here. Sustainable food is a big part of what we look at, not only sort of from the side of it being a problem, but ultimately trying to understand where the solutions are, where are the entry points for trying to improve the sustainability of the food system. So here they are interviewing both consumers and producers to better understand the role of the farmers markets and how to move that idea forward. Some of you may have read, there's been a bit of traffic through the media recently over the last sort of year and a bit about a forest called, we call it the Catchacoma Forest, just up on Highway 507 north of Mississauga Lake and Catchacoma Lake. And this was a beautiful project. And this is really, for me, the heart of YLS. I met a fellow named Peter McQuinby, who's the director of Old Growth Forest and Exploration. And he wanted to know if this forest was, he had a grant to explore forests in our region to identify old growth forests. So he did some field work, and he got our class out doing some field work. You can see in the top right there, Kira is coring one of the trees to age it. Measuring the diameters, and ultimately established that this was an old growth forest. And not only that, it's actually the largest old growth eastern hemlock forest in Canada. At the same time, we noticed, you'll notice at the top left, you might see the yellow mark around that tree. This forest was slated for logging. So pretty quickly, a measurement survey project turned into an advocacy project. And we've tried to better understand why old growth forest was being logged and what are the alternatives. So that's been ongoing. Here we are returning this year with the class. So they were engaged with the logging company and trying to better understand where the entry points were with the Minister of Natural Resources and forests to set aside this forest to protect it until we better understand what's at risk. And logged it was, both last year and this year. We went back in the winter, and then we connected with the Wilderness Committee. It's a national organization with an Ontario arm, and working with them, the students learn how an NGO is structured, what are some of the tools they use for fundraising and for advocacy. This was one of the walks on the bottom right, sponsored by the Wilderness Committee, where community and YLS participated. And this was us last January making our mark in the Cachacoma Forest. One of the students' fathers had a drone and ultimately sent out this message to the heavens above. We haven't been terribly successful yet. The forest is being logged as we speak, but it's an ongoing conversation. Mentioned earlier, in response to Roxanne, this is tricky business as a settler educator, but do what we can. Working closely with a few folks in the local First Nations and the First Peoples House of Learning at Trent to try and bring this to life as best we can. And it's difficult, but trying to get the students to recognize that our worldview is not the only worldview. And other approaches, other ways of thinking about our planet lead to quite different outcomes that generally preclude trashing the planet. So one of the key readings, I'm guessing many people on this call know of Braiding Sweetgrass. Ben, I know it's one of your mentioned as your favorite book. One of my favorites too. So we take our time with this, and it helps students imagine that there's different ways of thinking about some of these things we call resources. I love working in my world issues class with the Wayfinders and some of the work that Wade Davis, he's a settler writer, but works very closely with Indigenous people around the world. And it's all about questioning worldviews and rethinking some of these things. So it's a work in progress. The Indigenous Education of YLS, we're working with Gary Pritchard. He's a Curve Lake knowledge holder this year. And we're going to be working with him again next year up in the Cachacoma Forest doing some survey work. And I think this might be one of the last ideas here. I love this stuff. Some of you who follow sustainability know that there's so many neat things coming our way every day, new breakthroughs. So we try and keep track of this in our project work, the innovative ideas, and students are constantly sharing these and through their presentations. So whether it's up above where you've got a closed loop system with fish and produce, aquaculture, or in the bottom, a less sort of sexy picture of waste, but looking at all the things people are doing to reimagine a closed loop system. So the last thing I want to just leave you with before moving on, and I guess it really comes back to Trudeau's point, and that is where the leadership fits in, and how do we reach out to hear young folks' voices and amplify them. And I spend a lot of time thinking about it. I actually created a course for YLS. I call it Sustainability Leadership, where it's really, in a way, it's advocacy boot camp in a very kind of crude way of thinking about it. But these are the skills that we sometimes take for granted as adults. In the top left there, I've listed a few of them. Like, how do you work with the media? How do you make sure the media is working productively on your side to spread these important ideas? How do you write a press release? What do you need to do to sit down with a politician? How do you prepare for that? How do you mobilize other youth? How do you facilitate a meeting? These are all important skills that we practice in class and we talk about, and ultimately then provide opportunities. As you can see in the bottom right corner there. Well, actually, let's look at the bottom left corner. That's last year's climate march. That's the Peterborough youth. There's about 700 out that day. The YLS students played an important leadership role informally. One of the things they were advocating, this is a year ago, September, was that the city of Peterborough declare a climate emergency. There had been talk about it, and that's on a Friday. On the following Monday, you'll see Nico at the right actually making a deposition to council, urging them to do that for reasons that Trudeau expressed, that they're on this planet for longer. The story, Greta speaks to it so well. And I think there were, 8 YLS students who actually stood up in front of city council that night. And a number of people told me, the politicians told me afterwards, that it had a significant impact to hear it coming from the passion in their voice, in fact, tears as well. it's that close to their heart. So this was what, like what I call a coming of age experience for a young activist, is just to go to your city council and make a statement about where your priorities are. More recently, this year, and that's David. He's now an Adam Scott student, and he's speaking to this is just in December, speaking to city council about their budget priorities, and saying he was rather disappointed that he's not seeing any new money for climate action. And here are the 9 students from YLS who actually spoke in that meeting. And they did a beautiful job. They practiced in class, they got feedback from their peers, they kept it short, they kept it to 1 point. And now they are, all of them to a T, said, I can do that again, and I want to do that again. It sort of broke the ice and have the confidence. And for me as an instructor, this was a big deal for them to take that important step. You start small and you move from there. Last year we were in the elementary classrooms doing climate education. So the students created small lessons, short lessons to work either in the intermediate or the junior classrooms, and now found themselves at the front of the classroom. Really good experience to take on that leadership role. And then I would try and connect them with some leaders to sort of energize from and imagine themselves becoming leaders in different ways. So in our first year, Will, no doubt you remember the energy of Elizabeth May, like I call her the Tasmanian devil, the way she comes into, like, her energy into the room and just sort of lights us up for 45 minutes and then she's gone. But I know that resonated with students. Leadership looks different in different places. We all know the Greta story. It's remarkable how millions of young people have sort of found their voice that way. Closer to home, Autumn Pelletier from Manitoulin Island Territory. There's a number of organizations that are trying to get Autumn down to Trent, including the First People's House of Learning, to speak. Last year, we had the great fortune of actually engaging with David Suzuki on what was at the time a rather novelty thing called a Zoom meeting. He was in Vancouver, and we asked David to speak. David, tell us, what's the role of, where's the entry point for young people? Where's our niche in this larger conversation? What do young people need to be thinking about and saying? And he was very, very plain spoken, David Suzuki. There's actually a slide that's missing that I should say just to close it. One of my present students works closely with the Green Party, and we had an hour Zoom this year with Annemie Paul just a month ago. And for the young students to see, this is a person not a whole lot older than I am. I mean, she brings that youthful energy, and spoke to their place in all of this. So that's the program. That's what I was going to share with you in terms of the visuals. I'm not going to share this little video here. I'll invite you to visit the website that I mentioned earlier, was created by Ben, who's on our call. It's yls.green. You can see it in the logo. And there's a little promotional video, 3 minutes. It also gives you a flavor of what we do. And there's our coordinates for those of you who want to sort of keep track of what we do. I try and keep the Instagram account up to date because I know the young people follow that. I've fallen off Twitter a little bit. But that's, I'm going to stop my share there. And I think with that, I'd love to sort of have people respond to that and then maybe put that, what you've seen there, maybe in the context of that original question about, helping young people find their voice forward in this rather troubling times. So thank you for indulging me. I think I enjoy more than anybody the opportunity to relive those moments that I have with the students, because I can tell you, I have the best teaching job in Peterborough.
Thanks so much, Cam. That was awesome. I'm going to invite people to ask questions, and Steph or Kat or I can sort of help moderate that if you want to put put your hand up. Cam already knows this, but I tried mightily to encourage my son to sign up for this program. But you know, when you have a teenager that doesn't want to do what you want them to do, so I know how much he'd love it if he was in your room, but we just didn't get there. He went on to other things, but watching that made me very envious. And Steph's got a younger kid, so it's on her radar. But yeah, does anybody want to ask anything or contribute to that conversation?
And before they do, let me apologize. I went longer than I had intended. I get talking about this close to my heart. And so sorry, folks, we're much further through this hour than I had.
It's okay. We'll give you 10 minutes. And if people want to stay longer, they can, but we'll probably stop the recording at 1:15.
And that's completely fine as well. That's the entire point of Enwayaang. It's for me to give you a platform to like talk passionately about things that should make other people passionate. And that's the entire point of the talk. You did incredible.
But I want to add just my voice to it, that my daughter's in the background and she's like, I need into that program. So it was really wonderful to hear. I've heard so many good things about the program, Cam, and from so many different areas in Peterborough. So I'm just really grateful for this talk, and I'm really grateful for your work. Thank you for, it's choking me up even. I'm just so grateful.
Thank you. What grade is your daughter in?
She's just at the top of elementary, so she's a couple of years away, but she'll be she's headed in your direction as of now.
Got the application form ready.
We'll sign it.
That's great. Let's go to Roxanne and then Ben.
Oh, Nyawi, for that. Thank you so much for your work, your program, and the passion you have for that. It's so needed to help, generate that into the youth. I just wrote letters to Ford, the natural resources minister. I can't pronounce his name, unfortunately. I'm so angry. And also John Clark for the destruction of the wetlands here in Durham region, and the attempt to take down the heritage buildings in Toronto. And they're doing all this, through the minister's zoning orders, where they just put environmentalists, conservationists, anybody connected to land aside, and give carte blanche to the developers. And to me, developers are predators. I came from a very small town, 4,000. It's now 250,000. Once they opened that crack of a door to developers, they took every inch of land, and flora and fauna is gone that I was raised and ran the hills in. So, I mean, what do we do with that? And boy, did they, the shutdown, that's when it all happened globally. Nobody can fight. And anyway, not to keep the dark cloud, I know our youth are rising, and I know our youth are going to make a difference. And I'm very grateful for your program for helping toward that end. So thank you.
Thank you, Roxanne. And just before we go to Ben, I promise you, I want to just tell you of that, go to the point of how we start small, but it doesn't necessarily end small. There's a student who's actually the daughter of one of your employees, Colette. What's her? Help me out if you know Colette. She works in the graduate student.
It's Lori Colette.
Lori, thank you. Her daughter Malika arrived in YLS last year in grade 11. She was sitting at the back of the classroom. She participated. She was rather quiet, and she started getting some confidence. And then every time I sort of said, "Hey, who would like to present here or to respond to this or go do that?" And she ended up on Ontario Morning at one point, and then she led to the school boards, putting this remarkable presentation together to get the school boards to actually declare climate emergencies. It went on from there. She left YLS. This past fall, she was working at an international level with the mock COP, so youth from around the world in absence of the real climate change conference that was supposed to happen in Glasgow. Youth put together, she was one of the organizers of that, and she's now in a conversation to be featured in a feature-length documentary on youth climate action. So what I take away from this was that these are all tiny little steps that Malika made, little bit at a time. And one of the things we do on the first day, and Dennis and Cynthia, I don't know if Dylan talked about this, symbolically important, where we put some ropes on the ground and we talk about how we have our comfort zone that we operate in, and that's easy. And then we step into this next zone, and that's our area of most profound learning, where we just step outside the comfort zone. And that's kind of the model of YLS, is to place ourselves in that zone, but not in the outside circle where we basically just sort of panic and, curl up. So Malaika just kept taking that step outside of her comfort zone, small steps at a time. And those little steps, she started small, but holy cow. I have to say, quite honestly, when I want to know what's going on now in terms of climate action and the climate network, I go to Malaika, my student from last year.
Malaika just gave a wonderful presentation to the Eco Mentoring program on the weekend, and it was really nice. Here she is, a high school student, inspiring graduate students who are wanting to become teachers. It was a really interesting role modeling experience to watch that. But yeah.
It's amazing. Thanks for that. Ben, go for it.
Yeah, thanks. So Cam, I could just wax rhapsodic about all of the good things about your program, and also the fact that I meet the kids who've been in your program at every progressive environmental thing going on in the city. I have a different question than that, which is, you're breaking the bounds of traditional high school in many ways, apart from the content. You're breaking the bounds of the classroom. You're getting people out doing actual hands-on, real, meaningful work, and in connection with many other parts of the community. How can that model spread? What will it take for it to be way more than one small local program?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And that's a conversation that Julie and I have had right from the start. And to be honest, what I would love to do is put myself out of work, right? And so much of us, right? We want to, we shouldn't have YLS. There should be no need for YLS. YLS should be happening in every one of our classrooms, in my view. Really, like these are the most pressing problems of the world. And Malaika went to bat, as my son did in the Catholic board last year, to point out to them that we can name umpteen number of scenes from Shakespeare. But can you tell me how many parts per million carbon dioxide is safe and what we've got in the no? So there's some serious holes in our education system that we're trying to sort of nudge to go up against. And Ben, it's been difficult, and Julie knows this better than others. Like, this was not a slam dunk where we just walked in and said, hey, KPR, here's this idea of the program. They say, great, go for it. I'll just leave it at that. They're very supportive now. They are supportive, and they are looking at how to sort of to mainstream some of this. So that's sort of my next sort of focus on this, is how do we sort of trickle this back out, some of these ideas. Clearly, mainstreaming it is not bringing everybody up to Trent, but there are parts of this program that I think you're absolutely right, in some of the hands-on learning and some of the focus areas, some of the skill development that absolutely could be part of classrooms. And my experience with this, and I'd be curious to know of others, but it matters so much who's in the room. And if you've got leadership that's sort of maybe, I mean, there's some fantastic leaders at KPR, they just don't happen to be green-minded. So it's not really on their radar. And so we're working to get them to see that. And increasingly, it's pretty hard for it not to be on your radar. So I think there's some really positive moves. And we've seen it in the Catholic board. So now we're trying to leverage some of that to nudge the public board to catch up.
Thanks for that. I'm going to go to Kim, and then I'm going to probably ask us to close, because I know both Steph and I have to be in another meeting in very short order. So Kim, you're up.
I'll make it quick. I won't go through rave reviews of program. I'm completely on board and would love to see this more and more. A little bit of follow up on Ben's question, and wanted to see what's the sustainability of the YLS program, as far as, is there ongoing funding and support for this? Is it something you have to struggle for every year? And the second one would be interest by students. Is it easy to fill those seats? Is there a demand? What's the pulse on that one? And the third one would be expansion to other school boards. Is there a take or uptake on that?
Yeah. Thanks, Kim. Those are, you're reading my mind. These are the questions that I wrestle with. And I wish, a lot of people say, oh, Kim, great program, students must be lining up. Are you going to, offer a second semester of it? And I so wish I could say yes. It's not the case. I think there's a number of reasons. So is it expanding? Are we filling it up? I struggle every year to be perfectly honest, to fill the seats. And I always get just enough students, and it always works. I've got great kids. Like, I've never had a year where I feel like, oh, it's been great incoming enrollment. But I think part of it's a leap for young people to leave their home schools. So as much as the Trent University piece, I think, is a beautiful cornerstone of the program, it's also, I'm sure, keeping probably, a good chunk of students away to leave their friends, to come up and, interact in a brand new cohort. Yeah, I'm in the midst of enrollment right now, or recruitment, I should say, and I think I've got 10 students. I need another sort of 15. So I spent a lot of time thinking, and I'm thinking it's time that I reach out to somebody who knows a lot more about doing this than I do in terms of recruitment and marketing, and how do you reach people and let them know, because I think still there's not a lot of awareness about YLS in Peterborough. A bunch of parents know about it. Somebody might read about it in the paper, but it's because I'm not in any one school, it's actually hard to actually reach out and get on the radar.
Yeah, I think there's another challenge there, just that's not anything to do with you, but some of the faculty and parents on this call know the pressure for different courses they take to get to the various programs in university and trying to keep every option open. They have a hard time making room for all the things unless they plan really well in grade 8, 9. And that's not a fault of yours. It's just a problem of our system and how prepared a student has to be for their post-secondary.
Yeah, and I've had lots of conversations that have ended where a student didn't sign up because they just can't get all 3 sciences, and their social science and their co-op as well as YLS. To your last point, Kim, yes, I mean, no, it hasn't exported, but I was actually offered a chance to speak at a fairly high-profile international conference on sustainability, environmental education. That was until it was canceled for COVID. So I'm hoping to be back on that next year, because that's, I think, for me, I'd love to have this conversation go further and see what others are doing similar, and to maybe plant a seed somewhere else to get people thinking about that. But my first priority, to be perfectly honest, is to move it forward in my own school board. And to move some of this education into the grade 9 geography curriculum in a sort of cohesive way, and the same thing to bring it to life more. And there's a unit in grade 10 science that depending on whose class you in is either emphasized or not on climate. Of course, it's beautiful in civics, the civics class, but it may or may not be touched. So I think there's lots of really low-hanging fruit for working just within our own board, let alone advocating at a provincial level for curriculum adjustments to better reflect what are the global priorities.
So thanks for that, Cam. What we're going to do here is we're all going to promote the program to our various wide circles. We record this, as you know, and we post it on our Gzowski YouTube, and it will live on our Gzowski College website. So we'll make sure you all have that link so that you can also share the presentation with people if they want to see those slides and hear more about the program.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I think that will be helpful.
I have a granddaughter.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll post that. It's a YLS support group. I feel like we're in the YLS support group right now. So thanks everyone for coming. Cam, you're a gem of a human. We're so glad you're out there doing the good work. And thanks for joining us. Thanks everyone for your thoughtfulness and your questions. Spread the word. And we will, as I said, we'll make sure you all have that link. And so that if you want to pass it on so they can see the conversation, it might just help people understand what it's about.
Thank
you so much for everybody coming.
Thanks, everyone. Miigwech. Have a great evening.
And thanks to the parents for entrusting their children to the program, and for Will for diving in, and for Julie for the wisdom to from the beginning to see that this had merit, and for people like Ben who offer up from a community level to breathe life into the program.
It's awesome. Great to see you in the community. Bye, everyone. Thank you.